Part 1 of this video is all about the shipyards and the more notable ships built here along with a few of their unique stories. Be sure to watch that one too. But, for this one, it's all about the workers. Between 1942 and 1943, the Richmond Shipyards hired 90,000 workers, many of them women, African Americans from the rural South, and members of other underrepresented groups. The influx of new workers drawn by good wages for unskilled labor reshaped the social and cultural landscape of the Bay Area. It's well known that the World War II home front industrial workforce accomplished remarkable feats, especially given that the traditional labor pool. Healthy, young, white males were off fighting the war. The Kaiser shipyards were at the forefront of this new workforce, building ships in new ways in new facilities. But what has been difficult to discover is exactly which occupations these workers were engaged in and which unions represented them. Many workers were unskilled, and there were small technical schools within the yards for training them to do a specific job that they would do over and over and over. Some of the most common jobs were riveter, electrician, burner, chipper, machinist, and pipe fitter. In February 1943, women comprised 13% of all production workers at the Richmond Shipyards, including 40% of all laborers, 37% of boilermakers, 19% of welders, and 18% of burners, 11% shipfitters, and only 4% of other production job categories. In addition, 48% of the office and clerical workers at the Richmond yards were women. Yard 2 had the highest percentage of women workers, both in production jobs, 17%, and office and clerical jobs, 62%. By August 1944, women comprised over 27% of all laborers at the Richmond Shipyards. They were 41% of welders and 33% of burners, while only 19% shipfitters and 17% of machinists were women. Peaks for the individual shipyards varied. We also don't know how many boilermakers, iron shipbuilders, and helpers of America were hired. Under the shameful auxiliary number A36, created as a second-class entry for black workers. Before the war started, workers in the boilermakers were entirely white and male. Still, as the available workforce shifted and pressure mounted for the union to change their practices, they solved the problem of black workers in their ranks by creating a separate and unequal auxiliary. This practice was much criticized and violated federal regulations prohibiting racial discrimination in the workplace. Black workers at Bechtel's Marin Shipyard in nearby Sausalito resisted the Boilermakers' racist union membership policies. A lengthy court battle and intervention by President Roosevelt's Fair Employment Practice Commission finally resulted in a favorable ruling in early 1944, which was upheld in January 1945 by the California Supreme Court. Unfortunately, by then the war, and shipyard production, was almost over. Although most women took on male-dominated trades during World War II, they were expected to return to their everyday housework once men returned from the war. Government campaigns targeting women were addressed solely at housewives, likely because already employed women would move to the higher-paid, essential jobs on their own, or perhaps because it was assumed that most would be housewives. One government advertisement asked women, "Can you use an electric mixer? If so, you can learn to operate a drill." Propaganda was also directed at their husbands, many of whom were unwilling to support such jobs. Many of the women who took jobs during World War II were mothers. Those women with children at home pooled together in their efforts to raise their families. They assembled into groups and shared such chores as cooking, cleaning, and washing clothes. Many who did have young children shared apartments and houses so they could save time, money, utilities, and food. If they both worked, they worked different shifts so they could take turns babysitting. Taking on a job during World War II made people unsure if they should urge the women to keep acting as full-time mothers, or support them getting jobs to support the country in this time of need. The Lanham Act of 1940 was passed during this time. It was the first and only successful and nearly universal federal child care system passed in the United States, and it was put in place to support women in the workforce. This program ended 6 months after the end of the war. Over 6 million women got war jobs. African American, Hispanic, white, and Asian women worked side by side. Once women accepted the challenge of the workforce, they continued to make strong advances towards equal rights. This is the home of the famous Rosie the Riveter. Women quickly responded to Rosie the Riveter, who convinced them that they had a patriotic duty to enter the workforce. Some claim that she forever opened the workforce for women, but others dispute that point, noting that many women were discharged after the war and their jobs were given to returning servicemen. These critics claim that when peace returned, few women returned to their wartime positions and instead resumed domestic vocations or transferred into sex-typed occupations such as clerical and service work. For some, World War II represented a major turning point for women as they eagerly supported the war effort, but other historians emphasize that the changes were temporary and that immediately after the war was over, women were expected to return to traditional roles of wives and mothers. A third group has emphasized how the long-range significance of the changes brought about by the war provided the foundation for the contemporary women's movement. Layla Rupp, in her study of World War II, wrote, "For the first time, the working woman dominated the public image. Women were riveting housewives in slacks, not mother, domestic beings, or civilizers." After the war, as the nation shifted to a time of peace, women were quickly laid off from their factory jobs. The Rosies, and the generations that followed them knew that working in the factories was in fact a possibility for women, even though they did not re-enter the job market in such large proportions again until the 1970s. By that time, factory employment was in decline all over the country. Eleanor Otto, known as Last Rosie the Riveter, built airplanes for 50 years, retiring at age 95. Some homages to these workers are Penny Coleman's Rosie the Riveter. There was also, very briefly, a Wendy the Welder, based on Janet Doyle, a worker at the Kaiser Richmond Liberty Shipyards. In the 1960s, Hollywood actress Jane Withers gained fame as Josephine the Plumber, a character in a long-running and popular series of television commercials for Comet cleansing powder that lasted into the 1970s. This character was based on the original Rosie character. One of Carnival Cruise Line ships, the Carnival Valor, has a restaurant located on the Lido deck named Rosie's Restaurant. The restaurant is mostly a tribute to Rosie, but also contains artwork depicting other war-related manufacturing and labor. In 2010, singer Pink paid tribute to Rosie by dressing as her for a portion of the music video for the song Raise Your Glass. The 2013 picture book Rosie Revere, engineered by Andrea Beatty, features Rosie as Great-Great-Aunt Rose, who worked building airplanes a long time ago. She inspires Rosie Revere, the young subject of the book, to continue striving to be a great engineer despite early failures. Rose is shown wielding a walking stick made from riveted aircraft aluminum. Singer Beyoncé paid tribute to Rosie in July 2014, dressing as the icon and posing in front of a "We Can Do It" sign often mistaken as part of the Rosie campaign. It garnered over 1.15 million likes, but sparked minor controversy when newspaper The Guardian criticized it. Other recent cultural references include a Big Daddy enemy type called Rosie in the video game BioShock, armed with a rivet gun. There is a DC Comics character called Rosie the Riveter, who wields a rivet gun as a weapon, first appearing in Green Lantern Volume 2 No. 176, May 1984. In the video game Fallout 3, there are billboards featuring Rosies assembling atom bombs while drinking Nuka-Cola. Of the female hairstyles available for player characters in the sequel, one is titled Wendy the Welder as a pastiche. Boeing Orbital Flight Test 2, an uncrewed test flight of the Boeing Starliner spacecraft to the International Space Station, carried an anthropomorphic test device named Rosie the Rocketeer. The device contained 15 sensors to collect data on the effects of the flight on future passengers. In 2024, singer Katy Perry paid tribute to Rosie by dressing as her for a portion of the music video for the song Woman's World. These are just a few examples of people paying homage to these workers, and there is also a few museums that have some of the workers' belongings, books, and stories. The town of Richmond had to be upgraded substantially to cater to this booming workforce. Housing, supermarkets, banks, hospitals, and so on were all built to suit this very diverse group. Richmond became a proper city due to these shipyards, and today many descendants of this workforce still live here despite the yards being closed for good. Do you know of someone who worked or lived here? Leave a comment. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of Northern California's amazing history. And as always, happy trails!